This past weekend saw the ESL Impact DreamHack Dallas qualifier take place, where Quality Kermits were able to come out on top and book themselves a spot at the international event happening in June. ESL Impact is ESL's initiative to try and bridge the gap between the female and male scene. If you want to know more about it, be sure to check my other video out that I've got on my channel. But yeah, this particular video is going to be talking about the qualifier that happened this weekend. So let's get into things. Obviously, as I said, Quality Kermits were the team who were able to win this weekend and get themselves that spot at the international event. Now, if you don't know who Quality Kermits are, I wouldn't blame you, because it's not like they've been a team in South Africa for a very long period of time. You've got Kristen, Casey, Kinslayer, Scorps, and then Nats as well. Lots of well-known players in that team from the South African female scene. It's not like they know namers. Some of the best female players, some of the players who have been in mixed teams as well. It was just a team that essentially got formed to compete at this qualifier. Not at all a team that's been built to try and move their way forward through the season. If it wasn't for this event, they wouldn't have been a team, essentially. I believe Kristen even came back from Malta to compete in this event as well. Fair enough. I mean, she's been in South Africa for so damn long. One of the stalwarts and the veterans in the community and the scene. Definitely deserved a shot at the international when she was in her prime. So I'm glad that she got her chance to go overseas, and she's obviously taken it with both hands. Casey as well, one of the strongest. I've always actually, personally said I think she's the best female player in South Africa. I know she did some work with Heartbreak and Elusive and Zip Zip recently, playing in a team with them, and I'm sure she learned a lot and grew from that. So I think it's exciting that Casey's going to be getting a chance. We get to see her playing against international opposition now as well. We get to see how she's going to be matching up against those players overseas, and I have a pretty good idea or feeling that she's going to be the one who transitions like really smoothly at that level, and I'm keen to see her there. Kinslayer as well. She's been another person who's been competing in mixed teams for a while now, from what I'm told. Obviously, we don't know each other at all, outside of names, but from what I've seen from the outside, she's a solid player, and she's been working hard on her game at the mixed level for a while. And then Nats and Scorps are also two veterans and stalwarts from the South African scene. They both actually were a part of the Elite Pro female team that went over in 2017 to compete overseas, which is obviously the first international event for a South African female team. So they were a part of that squad, and now they're a part of this Quality Kermits team as well. Actually, coincidence, I don't know about that. 6 years between the two, and they're still making it happen is pretty damn impressive. So shout out to those two players. Keen to see them at the event as well. So that's the Quality Kermit squad. Came together apparently like a week before the event, based on social media. It didn't even seem like they were going to be having a go at this, like it was something they spoke about, and then sounded like they almost decided against it. But they end up actually coming together and competing. Sounds like Kristen has a torrid time trying to even get to South Africa to compete in the qualifier. And essentially, everything kind of points to the fact that this team's just going to have some fun. But really, shouldn't be winning the event for a team who's come together in such a short span of time with barely any history together as well. Either way, so they were the team who were able to win, and they did a fantastic job of it, upsetting ATK. That was the big victory that sort of any team that was going to qualify would have had to have beaten ATK, considering that they were the favorites coming into this. They'd won all the cash cups. So I think it was obvious to everybody from the outside that, yeah, surely ATK female team is going to be the squad to qualify for this international event, right? And unfortunately, I mean, that's what happens with these big qualifiers. The nerves come through. Obviously, lots of inexperienced players in that team, so big opportunity like this probably weighs on you quite drastically. So I'd imagine that they were feeling they were feeling the nerves in that game. A best of one is obviously very rough as well. To play for your lives in a best of one. Quality Kermits would have loved the fact that it was a BO1. As a team who's the underdog, you love best of ones. But talking about the format itself, we can go on for ages, talk about the fact that it wasn't the perfect format by any stretch of the imagination. Just to explain it, from my understanding, because we only had one qualifier in South Africa, where Europe, North America, and South America have an open qualifier and a closed qualifier. We took the same shape and the same format as the open qualifier, because we only had one qualifier, which was the best of ones, single elimination until the final, which is a best of three, which is obviously super rough. Like when you're trying to find a team, you want the best team to go overseas. You want the structure and the format that's going to be allowing for the most authentic competition, not just like upsets. And listen, not disparaging at all from Quality Kermits' achievements, so that you shouldn't be taking that away from what I'm saying. I'm more just speaking about in general if we want to talk about ideal formats for competitions. But we play the hand we're dealt. Here in South Africa, we don't get to bitch and moan about formats and talk about, oh, if this or that was different or better. We're getting an international qualifier. We're getting a chance to, compete with some of the best teams in the world. And ultimately, that's what matters. So we need to, like I say, play the hand we're dealt and move forward. Um, Talking about the event itself, as I mentioned, walking through the results, great win from Quality Kermits on Overpass to beat ATK female team, which, like I said, that was the victory that you needed. I think once they beat ATK, they probably had a lot of confidence that they could go on to win the final as well. Um, but that the Riace team actually put up a really strong fight in that grand final. I think they won the first map like 16-3, and then they were leading the second map like 15. I don't know if it was it like 15-10 or 15-11 or something like that. They had a number of match points and they weren't able to finish it off, winning just that one more round to close off the second map. The comeback came through from Quality Kermits. They won on the second map, and then they themselves were leading on Inferno, were Quality Kermits, and they choked as well. They weren't able to finish the game off, and you had Riace who brought it all the way back on Inferno. I think they took it into overtime, and then eventually they lost out in overtime. So, you know what, when in terms of entertainment, there was some thrilling stuff with how back and forth the games were, especially when you knew how much was on the line. You could tell how much all the ladies, all the players cared about the game, and everybody was so invested in it as well. So I thought from that standpoint, I really felt the tension, which was cool. And I think everybody was really excited about the opportunity. So in terms of entertainment, it was definitely there. The value was there. I think that final was cool. Unfortunately, Riace, yeah, I'm sure they're still haunted by the fact that they weren't able to win that one round and qualify for the event. But such is the nature of the beast. So that is how things played out this weekend. Just talking about the few games that I watched myself. So there's a few other things that I want to highlight from this weekend that I picked up on that I think are probably noteworthy and maybe deserve some dialogue. And the first one is the fact is how many players we had on each team. So if my maths is correct, which it absolutely isn't, I think there were like 53. Like I just did a quick add up. I think there's like 53 players that registered across the 7 teams in the event, right? So there were 7 teams that registered, and I think there were like 53 players across 7 teams. So you know there's like 10 players in Illicit, there was 9 players in WRG Amarellis, and 9 players in Riace as well. Those are the ones that stood out to me. And I get like maybe in the long term, I saw a post saying, load shedding, and there were people who had full-time jobs and medical issues and stuff. So like maybe in the long term it would make sense to, have that many players if you want to have, 8 in a roster, because you're not a super committed team, but you've also got other things in life. I can understand that. But I think for an event like this, there's no need to have 10 players in one team. Just form 2 teams. Let's show more representation to ESL Impact. Let's show, we've got the numbers, we've got the teams. I think it was a missed trick and a missed opportunity there to be having so many players sitting on the sideline, watching the games from home, watching the games on the streams, when they could have had an opportunity to even just play one of those games themselves. And I do think it's an unnecessary amount of players. With 53 players, you can get almost 9 teams with 6 players in each team. So that means you can almost have 9 teams with each team having a sub as well. And you say, well, come on, it's not 9 teams versus 7 doesn't make a massive difference, but it's like a 25% increase or more, right? So I think it is actually significant. And not only that, you look at the Oceanic region, they were actually only able to put up fucking 2 teams, 3 if you include the one that had 4 players in. So they one match, they played one game, the whole bracket, and that the team that won that game qualified. So our competition's not that stiff apparently, but we want to continue to go above and beyond and push the envelope. We, South Africa, pride ourselves in the region that's growing each time with the ESEA signups each season. We're we're outshining the likes of the Oceanic region in the mixed seasons as well, and also the Asian Pacific region. I think the Middle East as well, if I'm not mistaken. But the point in case is that we're showing that we deserve that support from ESL, and I think that's really important. Anyways, I just think we could have done more in terms of putting more teams up to compete at the event. Um, and maybe someone can help me understand why it's important to have 10 players in a team for a weekend long event, because I just don't really see the logic in that. Um, Looking at another thing that caught my eye was the fact that there were two teams out of the seven that registered that didn't even get to compete at all this weekend. They didn't even take part. So XVG, Extreme Vision Gaming were one team. I saw that there was some drama with webcams there, so I went and got the information to find out from the team's perspective what happened, and I checked the rule book as well. So it turns out that two of their players didn't have webcams initially. Then one of them was going to get a webcam with their cell phone, and they decided to pull out of the tournament. I'm not sure if it was an admin that said to them, "You can't play," explicitly in those words, or whether they took the issue with the webcam and or said, "All right, well, I guess we can't compete then." But where my logic comes in here, you look at the rule book, you read what the what the rule book has to say for the event, and it speaks about being fined for not actually for not having players webcams on. They've got the full breakdown. If it's one player, two players, three players, if they have it off for more than one match, there's all these different fines that come through. It's like hard set numbers, like $50 fine or $100 fine. So if they'd done their due diligence, if they'd, read in the rule book that they were still allowed to play, even though, they didn't have their webcams and they were willing to pay the fine, then like they can't blame the admins for that, right? Unless, as I said, the admin came out and said, you explicitly aren't allowed to play in this match because you don't have your webcams on, which it actually doesn't say anywhere in the rule book. It only explicitly talks about fines for teams. It nowhere says you are not allowed to compete or take part. So if the admin did say that to them, first of all, the admin is definitely in the wrong there and should probably, obviously the admin needs to be the person to know the rule book inside out, and there needs to be a conversation there. But ultimately, at the end of the day, a team is responsible, for making sure they know the rule book as well. And had they been completely familiar with the rule book, I feel like they would have contested that point and they would have been able to do something about it were they willing to pay the fine. So I just feel like that was an unnecessary situation that took place. And then another very unnecessary situation that takes place, which is difficult to talk about, is the fact that DNMK didn't get to even check into the event. Now it's a, you know, it's up in the air, obviously. So that the reasoning that I've heard from the team themselves is that the check-in process bugged out for them when they tried to check in. When they did, it didn't work. Or then when they went back to check if they were checked in, they weren't after they did check in, apparently. um, and when it was contested, the admins weren't going to be, giving them restarting the bracket or anything, because what happens, just to explain to everybody, who doesn't know, like myself, I wasn't aware. You have to check in, like the event after registration is you have a 1 hour period to check in once registration ends, and that check-in process is to actually like create the bracket for the event itself. So you need all the teams to check in so that you can then create the bracket, and then from there begin the competition. So if a team doesn't check in, obviously they don't get simulated into the bracket, and then from there you can't manually add them in, because it's all about seeding, and obviously it's all about the back end stuff to create these brackets, right? It's not like you can just like manually change it. So I don't know if they could have restarted the event. I've heard of these situations before where they haven't restarted the brackets. I think there's, like, again, more to it than meets the eye with these types of situations. So again, I wanted to try and have the most sort of objective opinion on this. So I went onto the ESEA website myself, and reading literally the first paragraph says registration will close 15 minutes before the event. At that point, ESEA rosters cannot be modified, blah, blah, blah. Check-in opens 60 minutes before the event is scheduled to start, and teams have 45 minutes in order to set up and check in to be included in the bracket. That's the first paragraph right there. Underneath that is a hyperlink on how to check in. You click on that link, and it's clearly a very easy process. Anybody in the team is able to check in, and anybody on the team is able to check if you're actually going to see if you are checked in. So it's not like you can even put the responsibility on a single person. Everybody on that team would have been capable of going and looking and seeing that they weren't checked in, assuming that there was some sort of miscommunication somewhere. If there was actually a bug with the check in, which is the other reality now that we need to consider, well, I mean, then that's something you need to take screenshots of. With so much time before the check-in as well, you would imagine that um, you would try and get on top of that check-in, earlier on, so that if there was something going wrong, you would be able to then, deal with the issues with the admins. I know how it goes. I'm the worst at leaving things to the last minute. Genuinely, I am. Projects and all the rest. So what that means is I know how it feels like in the last few minutes. You want to try and do something, you get it done, and maybe you run out of time. Maybe it slips your mind, whatever it might have been. Maybe they did do it in the last minute and there was an issue, and then that didn't leave enough time for it to be resolved, which is also another conversation or another potential reality. Anyway, I'm not throwing any bricks around here. I mean, obviously I'm gutted for the DNMK team that they weren't able to compete in this event. So I'm sure it must have been heartbreaking for them. The international qualifier, right? Like something we've waited a long time for. So I'm sure they're gutted, have to just keep their heads down and focus on the next one. But again, that's just like just feels like that's a rough one, man. Something that definitely could have been avoided, along with the webcam issues. So those, we had 7 teams that qualified for the event. 2 of them didn't even compete for issues that, um, yeah, could have been avoided. Unfortunately, it is what it is, I suppose. The last point that I want to make is the fact that it was Quality Kermits who were able to qualify. It's quite crazy. A team who were formed a week before, other team were able to come together and win. And I think it probably says a lot about where the South African female scene is at right now. You consider the fact that we've been trying to work on the South African female scene since 2017, where Metal State started their Valkyrie event, and that was supposed to be the catalyst. And here we are, coming up on 6 years later, guys, and the best that we can do is a team that was formed 1 week before with people traveling overseas, no practice or anything like that, and they're able to claim the spot for the international qualifier. And I just think that speaks volumes as to where that South African scene, the female scene, is right now. Personally, we got to look at what Ruan said. I think that Twitlonger he made is very valuable. I see a lot of stuff on social media that just seems like we're holding ourselves back as well. But I'm also not acting like I've got all the answers. It just feels like we are our own worst enemies, maybe at the moment. And yeah, maybe a few things need to be adjusted or looked at. Either way, I am very happy for Quality Kermits. I don't at all want to take away from them their achievements. My friends in that team as well, particularly Kristen and Kayla, and I'm super happy for them. And I'm so keen to see what they can do overseas. And let's not forget that there is also another opportunity for a South African female team to go overseas later this year. That's going to be to, I don't think is it Valencia? I don't know. I think it might be Valencia or something like that. Anyway, I'll make another video on that later, closer to the time. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed this one.